Coffee is unique because it allows some natural vegetation around it. So it's not like a rolling hill of tea. When you're in a tea plantation, you can just see grasses of tea, which is very different from coffee. Coffee kind of has a lot of forest cover, really, a lot of other trees that grows along with the coffee bushes. And that presents an opportunity to really look at it as an agroforest rather than as just agriculture.
Okay.
And where we really focus on basically when we talk of how we might conserve biodiversity, we're not talking of coffee, we're talking about every other plant that grows along with coffee, that can be, create a habitat for all of the wildlife that exists there. So we're really focused on the non-coffee bits of the coffee farm.
Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to our channel, please consider subscribing to it and hit the bell icon so that you never miss an update. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I have with me a very accomplished individual in the social sector from Bangalore, India, Arshiya Bose. Arshiya, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Arshiya is the founder of Black Baza Coffee, which is a social and conservation enterprise. She's a PhD in geography from the University of Cambridge. She's an Acumen Fellow. She's a Kinship Conservation Fellow, and she's a National Geographic Explorer. Quite a journey you've had, Arshiya. So let's talk about Black Baza Coffee. Tell me a little bit about this venture.
So, coffee is a plant that has transformed the world.
Correct.
We drink 1/3 as much coffee in the world that we do drinking water. And it's said to be the second most highly valued commodity, second only to petroleum. So we drink a lot of coffee.
Correct.
And we don't think of India as growing coffee, but we're actually the 6th largest producer of coffee in the world as well. For me, coffee is an interesting combination or a meeting point of all the things I studied as a student, and then as a researcher, in a very kind of real world market context. And Black Baza coffee, I suppose, is an exploration and an experiment of whether we might be able to trade this already hugely global commodity in a very different way.
Okay.
In a way that really recognizes and places value on, people, producers in that coffee value chain, as well as nature.
Okay. And, you said that you work with smallholder coffee producers. Help me understand what you mean by smallholders and what are some of the challenges they face.
So, kind of continuing along with how kind of coffee is grown, the other interesting thing about coffee is, of course, the sort of human face of it, which is that other than 1 or 2 pockets in the world, particularly perhaps maybe in parts of Ethiopia, coffee is always grown to be sold. So there are, there's very active kind of growing cultivation culture. But it's actually grown by people who cultivate on fairly small parcels of land, which is very different from the way we might grow tea, for example. And in India, we find that coffee is largely cultivated. 83% of coffee producers in India cultivate on less than 5 acres of land, which presents a unique set of, I think, hardships and challenges. Often where coffee is grown geographically is also very interesting, and we find there's overlaps between indigenous and tribal communities and coffee growing regions. So you already have fairly marginalized, fairly impoverished communities who have now recently started cultivating coffee. It's not a traditional crop in many parts of India.
Mhm.
And it means that access to a fair and transparent market is actually quite challenging for a smallholder producer who may not know what the prices are, for example, who may not know what the quality of his or her own produce is, and so be able to negotiate and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
And we find that, for example, levels of exploitation is very high among smallholder producers who consistently receive way less than what the market price of coffee is.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, before I go to the next question, I want to ask you, what does Black Baza mean?
So Black Baza is actually a bird. It's a small bird of prey that's found across Asia,
Uh-huh.
and found in typically fairly dense, healthy forests.
Okay.
And so for us, the Black Baza is symbolic of the kind of cultivation we would like to see much more of. A kind of coffee growing practice that coexists with all of the biodiversity. And so for so that's why we called ourselves the Black Baza coffee.
Coffee. Okay, so now moving on, you mentioned that, a very large number of the smallholders have less than 5 acres and
Right.
they don't probably get the right pricing. At what stage do you and your team step in? And how do you help the farmer, if I can use the word? And please, if you have any interesting anecdotes, I'd love to hear them.
So, I mean, what's interesting about my journey as an individual and then the journey of Black Baza Coffee as well is that the kind of research element of it is still very strong, even organizationally with Black Baza.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is often our involvement with producers actually starts with research.
Mhm.
And that means maybe we are in the landscape documenting what the history of land use is, what the life histories of coffee producers are,
Right.
what the surrounding biodiversity is, what the pressures are, what the challenges are. And from that, I suppose we look at what kind of solutions might emerge. And one of the ways we therefore go about it is that many of the producers were actually doing, we're researching their farms and their farm management practices, and they will very frequently ask us if we would like to partner with them and if we would like to, source their coffee and source their produce and so on. And so therein begins the journey of us actually sourcing our coffees from smallholder producers. But it does begin with research. It begins with a very kind of detailed understanding of what kind of trade, what kind of relationship people find fair, people want to engage in, and therefore how might we actually create an engagement that's beneficial to them. So it's also not the same in different landscapes. For example, in the Wayanad region of Kerala, we work very differently with smallholder producers than we might elsewhere. And so one size doesn't fit all. We don't have one way of working, but we do work either with farmer producer collectives and organizations and cooperatives, institutions, or directly with individual producers.
And for a farmer who's growing coffee, what is the size of land or a farm that he or she needs to have to make it economically viable?
I think, that's a difficult question to ask, because for most smallholder producers, there is only a finite piece of land, and very often kind of the option of expanding or extending doesn't exist. Very different from like what you might see as colonial plantations, which are now much larger pieces of land and people can expand. In one part of Karnataka where we're working, the average land holding is half an acre. Wow. So it's very, very small. They are more homestead coffee gardens than they are plantations as such. And that means many different things of how you might manage it.
Mm.
So, if you are cultivating on half an acre of land and you're keen on practicing organic farming practices, for example, there's numerous risks involved. What will you do if there's suddenly a pest outbreak and you can't spray the super toxic chemical pesticides that everybody else is around you? How would you manage it differently? So there's a lot of research and development that's involved. There's innovative kind of looking at different things, but our idea has always been about whether we might therefore be able to offset the loss in production that some smallholder producers might be facing with a different kind of market arrangement.
Okay.
A better coffee, a better quality coffee, a more premium sort of brand that might therefore make a small farm much more viable.
Okay. Interesting. And, for a coffee estate, what are some of the biodiversity challenges that are being faced?
So, coffee across the world overlaps almost identically with rainforest. So, in the Brazilian Amazon, Southeast Asia, and Borneo, parts of the Indian Western Ghats, and including parts of Uganda, Kenya, and other parts of Central Africa as well. So, wherever there is coffee, there is or was forest before. And so, the first biodiversity challenge really is that is asking the question of, should there really be coffee in this landscape or not? Should it really have been forest? But for whatever history of land use, we've ended up now with coffee. And coffee is unique because it allows some natural vegetation around it. So it's not like a rolling hill of tea. When you're in a tea plantation, you can just see grasses of tea, which is very different from coffee. Coffee kind of has a lot of forest cover, really, a lot of other trees that grows along with the coffee bushes. And that presents an opportunity to really look at it as an agroforest rather than as just agriculture.
Okay.
And where we really focus on, basically, when we talk of how we might conserve biodiversity, we're not talking of coffee, we're talking about every other plant that grows along with coffee, that can be, create a habitat for all of the wildlife that exists there. So we're really focused on the non-coffee bits of the coffee farm, so to say.
Fair enough. So my next question to you is, you mentioned that 1/3 of the amount of coffee we consume is equal to 1/3 of the water we drink.
Yes.
India as a nation has traditionally been drinking tea.
Right.
Except South India, which has always traditionally consumed a lot of coffee.
Right.
Yet we have now started to gravitate to selecting coffee. What is changing in our tastes?
It's a good question because, even as, so I didn't grow up drinking coffee. I only started drinking coffee as a PhD student, either to pull really long nights of work, or when I was doing research and I was meeting coffee producers. And even coffee producers don't drink coffee, right? That you go to a producer's house, they are more likely to serve you tea than they are coffee. So this the tea drinking culture is very much present even today, even in southern states. And I think it's partly to do with kind of what our palate is, I suppose. We like typically very astringent foods, and I don't know whether milky, sugary tea is a kind of deviation for that. So we sort of drink it interspersed between meals because we want to have sugar. But coffee is also a much more luxury product. And so as perhaps affordability is increasing, we see kind of coffee as a culture more than just a drink. It's a sort of lifestyle culture. You go out and sit with someone and have coffee. Whereas you might just make tea at home and sort of drink it. So that's also changing as well. You see people, in movies meeting at a coffee shop. You don't really, see them, drinking tea or any other beverage. So I think it's supposed culturally, but I don't, and but maybe also a shift in sort of how our foods in general are changing, and where the flavor of coffee really fits within that might be an interesting exploration.
Very interesting. And you just mentioned that you started it in drinking coffee in PhD while you wanted to spend or stay awake the whole night. My question to you is that when I look at millennials, when I look at my children, everyone wants to start their day with a coffee.
Hmm.
And I've often wondered, is coffee addictive?
Well, I don't think so.
Okay.
But I think, um, and there's many different ways to drink coffee as well, right? So I think depending on how you're brewing it, um, what you're deriving from it is very different. For example, a lot of the cycling community and actually gets that they're a huge sort of customer base for us, and we found out, and I didn't know that cyclists will have an espresso shot before they do a very long ride.
Okay.
And That's because um, coffee in a sense is called legal dope
Mm-hmm.
in the kind of caffeine hit that you get from it, and the sort of feel good energy you have after it, and black coffee does that. I don't know whether it's addictive though.
Mm-hmm.
It's an occupational hazard for me, and I'm not by any means sort of um, found myself
Fair
to
enough.
be addicted to coffee. But I do think the sort of drinking coffee black does give you the spunk and the sort of jump in your step that maybe a milky cup of coffee doesn't
I
really.
agree with you.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the first things I do when I wake up, and I'm a very early riser, is
yeah,
to make a cup of Nespresso.
right.
Because over the last 5 6 years that I've started drinking Nespresso, I've suddenly got quite used to drinking, and I won't say addicted. But
Yeah.
every morning I must have my small little shot of Nespresso. So
Yeah. And it's ritualistic as well, right?
correct.
So the sort of ritual of it is kind of telling your brain that you're waking up now. And what coffee has done very well, which some of the tea drinking cultures have, but certainly not, most commonly done in households, is that we made a ritual of brewing coffee.
Hmm.
So the brewing part of coffee has become very ritualistic. We
Okay.
use elaborate gadgets. We kind of pour things very slowly. We kind of swirl and smell it and
Right.
smell. So the sort of ritualness of drinking coffee is part of the reason that there's so much excitement, I think.
Probably. I was telling somebody the other day, I said, drinking coffee is almost like drinking a nice malt. You're
It is.
nosing it and you're checking it and you're tasting it, and it's very fascinating. So my next question, Arshiya, to you is that you are a geography student, and you're seeing what's happening in coffee around the world. What are some of your thoughts on the what coffee is doing to the environment, and what can be done to preserve it?
Mhm. So, I mean, one of many of us who are part of the coffee industry are actually quite worried about the future of coffee, because there's a lot of data, especially from the South and Central Americas,
Hmm.
coming out about how climate change and changing climates, particularly in higher elevations, is not only going to change the kind of production we have. So there's going to be huge shortfall in coffee, but also perhaps going to change how the coffee
Hmm.
tastes. And that's a source of worry, because compared to other parts of the world, we don't have too much higher that we can go in the southern Indian hills where coffee is grown. The elevations are 1600, 1800 meters, and we're already cultivating at that elevation. And so how much higher will we go to attain slightly cooler temperatures? So I think Indian coffee will be hit probably one of the worst in the world. And we might therefore see a difference in the kind of coffees we drink.
Mm.
I certainly don't think coffee will be as flavorful as soil changes, as humidity changes, as temperature changes. I think we'll lose some of the complex flavors that we want from coffee. So
Mm.
these are all, sources of concern and worry. And so for us going forward, the next 20, 30 years really has to be how might we, of course, build political will for looking at climate change,
Right.
but then also looking at individual farm levels to see how might we change practices to be able to deal with changing climate.
Mm. Mm. Very interesting. So I'm now going to move Arshiya to the last segment of our conversation, which is some questions for you personally.
Mhm.
A PhD in geography, done work, on many things. Fellow, in multiple organizations. What would you say are three key milestones in your life or your career?
I never really thought I'd be an entrepreneur, and I still don't really see myself as one. I don't think my dream was to create a company or a brand. I definitely come from the sort of academic culture of critiquing markets, critiquing corporates, critiquing
Mm.
capitalist sort of systems, and so how I ended up here is interesting, and there's probably a few different milestones. For example, when I applied to do my PhD, and I was beginning my PhD research, I was actually interested in the conservation of snow leopards and Himalayan kind of conservation
Mm.
issues. um, I suddenly fell ill with a sort of mysterious set of allergies that prevented me from traveling too far. And on doctor's advice, I was told to only do field work close to home, which was Bangalore.
Mm.
And so therefore I kind of explored and found myself in coffee regions, looking at what was happening with coffee.
Mm.
So as a student, as frustrated and heartbroken that I wasn't able to do this big Himalayan adventure,
Mhm.
it's also the reason that I ended up here. So had I not been ill, and thankfully I've recovered,
Mm.
but I don't think I would have really been in this field at all. So
Wow.
that's definitely a kind of milestone, although an unplanned one.
Mhm.
And I remember towards the end of my PhD as well, I was at a farmer's house interviewing him, and his mother came and sort of joined our conversation, and she asked me something that I didn't quite have an answer to. I was a Cambridge PhD student, so I thought, okay, this is the cat's whiskers, right?
Mhm.
I this is of course, like, look at what an elite institution, this, that, to 800 years of history of Cambridge University. And she said, are you going to do anything useful after you finish your research? And of course, at that point, every PhD student thinks that their research is going to change the world. And here was this 80-year-old woman telling me that clearly it was not making any difference.
Mhm.
Which is perhaps the conversation kind of stuck in my head, and once I finished, I didn't think I wanted to follow an academic path after that.
Mhm.
I thought, okay, if this 80-year-old woman is asking me to do something useful, I must give it my best shot. So I think that's one of the other big milestones that sort of shaped where I am today.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal. So, Arshiya, I have time for two more questions for you. My next question is that from where you stand today, and you're very young and there's a lot of life ahead, but from where you stand today, what does success mean to Arshiya?
Well, so I think the way I look at my work, and the way that I look at the role of Black Baza, I'm probably inconsequential in this picture, right? I would like for us to think about what success is for all of us who
Mm.
are part of the organization, who are part of the coffee growing community, and so on and so forth.
Mhm.
So personal success is probably the least important a bit of this, and I don't actually spend too much time thinking about it. What I'd like for us is to have collective milestones, is for us to constantly be valuable to each other, to be connected to each other. I'd like the value chain of coffee consumer to producer to be meaningful connectedness. Success is when you know who's growing your morning cup of coffee, and and there's fair price and there's fair treatment of people across that value chain. So those, I think, are the larger successes. I don't know whether I have a sort of personal success.
Okay.
I suppose the personal success is to be to be able to keep doing it every day.
Fantastic.
Maybe that's just the answer to that.
Wonderful. And my last question to you is that who or what inspires you to keep pushing yourself to do so many interesting things?
Well, I mean, every time I think I've worked really hard and done something good for the community, I look over and see my mother doing 10 times more and 50 times faster. And I think, okay, if this is who I'm competing against, then I have a really long way to go. So, I mean, my mother is an incredible person. And so she's a constant source of inspiration.
Wonderful. Arshiya, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you for this amazing journey you have taken me down on coffee. What is coffee doing to the world and to each one of us? Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.